myself again. But it's the only way you're ever gonna learn. You look back and it's all in the past. I'm dwelling on that.
Good evening, and welcome to NUFC Matters with me, Steve Wraith. It's Wednesday night, which means it's retro night, and I'm joined by George Mitchell, Neil Mitchell, Steve Wilkinson, Steve Hasty and Stu Penman as we go over matches between Newcastle United and Portsmouth. And as always, we'll have our regular features towards the end of the programme. Celebrity Portsmouth fans, where the lads try to guess who those famous faces are, and players that played for both clubs, and then the lads try to put an 11 together with some of the names that they've come up with. As always, we start off with George, looking back at games that the lads remember, maybe were at, or just want to talk about. So, George, over to you first for your first recollection of Newcastle Portsmouth.
Well, this going to be more like a Stu Penman story, because yes, it involves a match, but the story, as far as I'm concerned, revolves around the trip. I think I've said to you before, if I went away on a professional job and there was an opportunity to go to a match, then I would go to the match if I possibly could. And this is on Monday, the 2nd of May, 1988. And my boss, Arnold Emerson, my mentor, teacher, friend, whatever you call him, had previously not long retired. And we were in the middle of negotiating a contract with the Royal Navy, with their research at Hasler, which is right next door, which is across the water from Portsmouth. And when it came to the final negotiations of the contract and get the contract signed, Arnold had just said to the boss, "Well, just let George go. They all know him, and he knows what the score is, and let him finish the deal, sign the contract." So off I went to Portsmouth on Sunday, leisurely trip down on the Sunday, and they put me in the Crown Plaza in Southsea, which is the big tall hotel on the beach that you can see when you're in Portsmouth. Fantastic, fantastic view of the harbour. I mean, if any foreign powers want to on our navy, they just take the top 2 floors of that hotel and take all the pictures they wanted. You know, they were unabashed, unrivaled views of everything that we own. So I went down on the Sunday, ready for an early start on the Monday morning, and sure enough, out the hotel when this black limousine pulls up with a naval driver to take me to Hasler, and off I go and meet all the senior naval scientific service people at Hasler, where they have all experimental facilities, and John Brown was one of the leading ones, and they were really friendly, and we got into negotiations very quickly, and I could see that the whole thing was going well. Well, my plan was that I would try and get the negotiations finished in the early afternoon, so I could get back to the hotel and have some tea, have a shower, and go to the football match at 7:30. That was the plan. But we got to lunchtime, and in we went for lunch into the wardroom. Well, although Hasler's a shore base, they treat them like ships. So they have wardrooms, and the toilets are the heads and all of that sort of thing, just like you were on a ship. And I went into the wardroom with John Brown, and there was another scientific civil service man there called Bill Newton, who knew me. And I put my foot in the wardroom, and immediately Bill Newton says, "Oh, I know what George likes before lunch." Well, and what they thought when I used to go out with Arnold Emerson and the rest of the crew, that I was drinking gin. But what they didn't know was that Arnold used to make sure all I got was a glass of tonic water, because I don't drink, I don't use alcohol. And but Bill Newton, I know what George likes, and immediately pointed to this young matlock called Alan, who's with this big jug, and I could see by the colour of it, it wasn't just gin; it was pink gin. It was that translucent Angus Duras bitters pink. And I thought, well, do I now say to this man who's about to sign a £500,000 contract, "I don't want your alcohol"? I really don't want your alcohol. Thank you very much. I don't drink. I don't use it. And it's one of the first times in my life that I've shied away from saying to somebody, no, I don't drink. And because I knew what was possibly at the end of it. So I thought, well, take it easy. There's plenty of things, receptacles around the room. You can tip it in there if you don't want to drink it. But it wasn't that easy. So we had the pre-lunch drink, and I had this, and it wasn't just a little glass of gin, it was a schooner. It was a thing that big that was full to the top. So I had a few mouthfuls, but the only trouble was every time I put the thing down, this Matlow Adam turned up with his jug and topped it up again. So I'd realised it was fatal leaving this glass anywhere unprotected, because I was just going to get more and more. And slowly but surely through lunch, before lunch, we had a few more, and then we had lunch. And I avoided wine, of course. Then we had finished lunch and had a few more drinks afterwards, which meant that I had to think about what I was going to do with my pink gin. Well, Adam knew what I was doing with pink gin, because he immediately brought it to us and stood it down beside us. And so I had a few more sips, a few more top-ups, and I was okay. I felt fine. And we finished lunch and went in to finish the negotiations, and Bill Newton and Bob Brown signed the contract for me to take back to the university. And I think it was worth about £500,000. And I felt quite great. Then eventually they said, well, that's fine. And I thought, well, I'll get back to the hotel. So I went out, and the fresh air hit me like a I don't know what, like a barn door, wham. And of course, this naval driver that was driving the limousine that was taking us back to the hotel kind of helped me into the back of the car. And I guess that I wasn't, my feet weren't exactly going where I wanted them to go. So off we went back to the hotel. So the plan was I'd get back to the hotel, and about tea time I would ring Margie and say I was fine, and then I'd go off to the match. Well, I got back to the hotel and into the hotel, but after that I can remember very little, other than waking up the next morning about 10:30, lying on the bed, covered with a bed cover, and absolutely not a stitch of clothes on, and thinking, where the hell did last night go? What happened to the match? And so I just pulled myself together and had a shower and got ready. And by about midday, I was able to ring Margie and say, hello, Pet, I'm fine. I'm all right. And I won't tell you the sort of response I got, but never mind. So the match just disappeared. So I tried to find as much as I could about the game from people in the hotel, and one or two who had been, particularly the staff who had been at the match. And their report was it was a good game, which Newcastle won 2-1. The scorers were Scott, Kevin Scott, and Anthony Loma. Now there's a blast from the past.
Aye.
Anthony Loma was one of the goal scorers, and the scorer for Portsmouth, of course, was Quinn. And all the information I was from them, and then later on from the radio and TV reports, was it was a very good game, which people had enjoyed very much. And it's interesting reading some of the names in the teams, but even with the Portsmouth team, some of the names that we don't even recognise from our team, but might recognise from other teams, Dylan and Kevin Hall and Kevin Horn and McGuigan and McQuinn, of course, and in our team, Thomas, Kelly, Cornwall, Kevin Scott, Neil MacDonald, John Anderson, Michael O'Neill, David McCreary, Paul Gascoigne, Darren Jackson, and Anthony Loma. And of course, our manager was Mac Fall, and their manager was Alan Ball. So that was a game which is bedded in my memory, not really essentially because of the football, but because of the football I didn't see. Because once in my life I didn't say to somebody, no, I don't want your alcohol, I'm quite happy. So despite all of that, I can't even look at a pink gin these days. So there's the story.
Brilliant stuff, George. Nice to know you're human, George.
Well, there is one other time which I could save for another time. So never mind.
Keep that for another time, mate. Yeah, we don't want people thinking you're the new George Best on the anniversary where you would have been 70. Steve Wilkinson.
Right. Well, my first game, it's quite appropriate. I'm sharing my box in the top right hand corner with Sir Bobby, because it's a game coming towards the end of his time with us in October 2003. Newcastle 3, Portsmouth 0. It was Bobby's last full season, and quite a successful season in some ways, because we got to the semi-final of the Europa League, and had quite a decent team in this game as well, because Shea Given in goal, Aaron Hughes at fullback, Bernard, Andy O'Brien, Titus Bramble, Gary Speed, Lee Boyer midfield with Jermaine Jennis. Up front, Shearer, Lauren Robert, and Shola Amiobi, who is someone who I'm going to really talk about this game, because one, he made a significant contribution to the game, but it was thinking back to what you were talking about, Steve, last night with the strikers like leaving, like Muto, who was, and you sort of compared him with putting them on the pile with the people like Frank Pringle and others who were on the wayside. And I always sort of saw Shola as I wasn't Shola's greatest fan, but to me, he's always the benchmark centre striker, centre forward. You know, he's the benchmark, because he didn't have a 40 million price tag hanging around his neck, or any price tag, because he came through the ranks. He actually went to school with one of my mate's sons in North Walbottle, and he came through the youths, got into the first team, and was with us for 14 years, and his main part of his career, and played sort of nearly 400 games, most of them sub, a lot of them got 79 goals. So he's not prolific, but he scored some pretty crucial goals in that time, and you know, memorable goals like Barcelona when he scored away in that game, and another, I think he's second to Shearer in the scorers in European games. But in this particular game, he made quite a significant contribution. He started the first goal, which was ultimately scored by Gary Speed with a shot from about the edge of the penalty area. But it was started by a great run by Shola up the left wing. He used his gangly legs and outstripped the fullback, put a ball in the middle, square ball, flicked on by Lee Boyer to Lauren Robert, who laid it back to Gary Speed, who was coming in on the edge of the penalty area, and banged it in the bottom corner. The second goal on 25 minutes was a one that VAR would have had a look at these days. It was a shot by Boyer and a Portsmouth guy lying on the ground, and he got it with his hand. I think even in the new days it would probably be a penalty, but they would have had a look at it and found all sorts of angles and various ways to consider whether it was a penalty. But it was awarded anyway, and Shearer banged it in the net. And then the third goal was actually scored by Shola himself, and it was a cross from the right, and quite a strange headed goal. Shola didn't score a lot of headers for a big lad. I don't think he was that great in the air, but he sort of stooped down. He was about 15 yards out in the middle of the goal, and Shaka Hislop was in goal for them. And it sort of looped over Shaka's head, hit the underside of the bar, and bounced and went into the net. So that made the game 3-0. Harry Redknapp was manager of Portsmouth at the time, and they had some decent players in their team. As I say, Shaka was in goal. Teddy Sheringham, coming towards the end of his main times, was there. Andy Fair, who played for us as well. Steve Stone, a name from our past as well as his coach, and former Liverpool Patrick Berger. They were some of the players playing for Portsmouth that day. But it was a good win. It was a steady season, but as you know, I was sort of. I think Stu's going to talk later on about the 1992 game when we there's a lot of happened in 1992 that we're going to talk about, but the 1992 game going forward, when we were on the good run, was the sort of start of the glory years, I think, and sadly this game was part of the sort of coming towards the end when the season after that, when Bobby left early on, and things started going downhill once Graham Souness came in and we know the rest is history. And so it was kind of the end of what would have been sort of 12 years or so of fantastic football and relative success, although we never won anything. But so that was my first game, October 2003, victory 3-0.
Okay, great stuff. Stu, over to you, mate.
Well, the first game I'm going to talk about is in April 1992. It's probably the most underestimated game or most important game in I believe in the club's history. We were 2 games away from being relegated to what was the old 3rd division. It's for the new supporters, it's the ones the Mackhams are in now. Newcastle had never been in there, and in 1982, 1992 was our centenary year as well. So it would have been the first time in the full 100 years. And I'll just tell you before, when George mentioned about Pink Gin, hold on, is it that way? Yeah. That guy there will tell us about our encounters with Pink Gin recently. But that's when it goes out a bit. So I just turned 18, and although we had players that we all liked in the old side, we somehow managed to find ourselves in the mire. I did wrong there, didn't I? in the mire. So because I could legally drink, you feel like you're a man about town. I met my mates in Dobson's before the game. I don't know if it's still there now, Dobson's, but we met in there.
Long gone, that is. Long gone.
Is it?
The library.
No, but it just my birthday. I had my white jeans on and a pair of suede gazelles, and I thought, you're looking right dapper here. And had 6 pints, 2 trebles, and then off we went up to the match. Now, I was only young then; I couldn't drink that much, so we're just going up to the game. And it was. People say it's palpable, the tension in the air, but it wasn't just tension; it was nervousness, it was the trepidation. And I turned around and I said to the Hebrew mate, I says, "Do you know what? We could get relegated today. If results went against us, we could actually be relegated today." Do you know what he said? He says, "What? If we do, I'll blame that Steve Wraith big league."
For those of you watching, it's been a running theme on Twitter for the last 48 hours. I blame Steve, and there's been some funny ones. We'll cover that on the Three Amigos on Friday.
So anyway, not the first mistake I made with drinking and all that. You get to the ground, then I forget about the infamous Gallagher Bogs. So I've got these white jeans on with the new suede gazelles, and that was the last day I wore them. It's just like I had the grey socks on, and they were just trash. But anyway, into the game, the fans did their best to get behind the team, but the team must have been as nervous as us. It would have been the first time in our history that we could have went down. There was a couple of chances that went either way, and white jeans probably wasn't the best colour to wear when Portsmouth were on the attack. But then Ned Kelly scored that goal. And I was standing in the Gallagher's, and if you could draw a line from where the ball went into the corner, it was as if he was shooting it directly at us, but I was a bit higher up. And it went in slow motion. It was just when it left his foot, you're just waiting for it to hit the back of the net. And the relief, the raw, it still lives with us. And to me, to this day, it's still one of my most favourite games. And then you're waiting for full time. You've got like 15 minutes to go or so for full time. And you keep checking the scoreboard because mobile phones weren't about. And you keep looking at the scoreboard and you think, this thing stopped, hasn't it? The time just went slower and slower and slower. Then eventually we got the win. And as it happened, it ended up being enough because the next week was Leicester, which is a game that Mitch covered earlier in this series. But the bedlam when the goal went in will live with me forever. And, everyone was one, and that genuinely was in Newcastle United. I can't remember the crowd, but it must be now on 30,000 there. And I think you feel like you hear that on the TV, like it was as if the crowd sucked that Kelly shot into the net. And the people from the other side, the old stand or the west stand, who were blowing it in. Just with the beautiful noise when you hear it rustling at the back of the net, and then the raw split second later. it's days like that that make you remember why you love Newcastle United and why you always support them. So that's my first recollection of Portsmouth.
Great one as well. Great recollection. That one I'll remember for the rest of my life. Neil, over to you, mate.
Well, I can back that up about the nervousness in the town that day, and I think everybody would probably share that when you got to that game, it was we didn't realise. I think Tom's just put that across. Tom Lynch has just put that across the bottom. I don't think we did really realise the enormity of that result. Probably until midway through the second half of Leicester the next week, when it dawned on the shit. If we hadn't won last week, we would have been in big trouble. And that season was the first season me and one of the lads got a season ticket, and you couldn't stand at the scoreboard with one. You had to be an M paddock next to it, and we used to dive across at the gate where the copper used to stand, and that was the first game we couldn't get across in to join everybody because everybody was just on high alert for the full day. It was just that tense, and the massive relief when that ball went in, cracking, and such an important game. Anyway, my first game.
Tell about the pink gin, Mitch.
Well, the pink gin's become a ritual. When Stu comes over, we'll go and have a bite to eat in a restaurant called Prego's in the Media Ritana, and they've got a very fantastic gin bar, and so we always start off with the pink gins when Stu arrives in Dubai. However, we did get it's refreshing, but we did get a rather large surprise with the bill this time.
Oh, did we not?
Anyway, we digress.
Somebody's already quid a drink. That's what they were. 22 quid a drink.
Was that what it worked out at in the end? 22 quid a drink.
22 quid a drink.
That was a rather.
So work that out.
Yes, somebody's card got a bash in that day. Anyway, my first game is one somebody's already mentioned. Somebody asked me this week what the sport Newcastle United's like, and I said it's like owning our beagle. And they're like, "What do you mean?" I says, "Well, everything's great and he's lovely and he loves everything and he's such a great dog. And then you come home one day and find that he's destroyed the legs of the dining table, shit in the cat's bed, and eating a pack of 6 AAA batteries and
Oh, is he gone? He's got a phone call. He's gone. Is he back?
And that's United's like that. Sorry, somebody was just trying to call us.
I see. I knew that's what had happened. Right, go on, carry on, mate. We lost you for a bit.
So the beagle does everything, and then you forget it 2 days later, and you still really love it, and that's what supporting Newcastle's like. And this game sticks out in my mind because this was the game when we realised Sam Allardyce really was a fraud. And it's the 4-1 loss at home to Portsmouth in November 2017. He'd spoke himself up all week, telling me he had a tactical surprise for Redknapp coming. And he did. He changed and played a back 5, which looked really good after 6 minutes when we went 1-0 down. And even better after 9 minutes when we went 2-0 down. Then when we went 3-0 down on 11 minutes, and the Brazilian centre-back Caçapa had been sat on his backside 3 times, it really didn't look very clever at all. And did he make a change? Not at all. Stuck with it. Didn't do anything to change the game. Portsmouth arrived in good form. Harry Redknapp had obviously had an agent friend at the previous season's African Cup of Nations because he had half the best players of Africa in his team. And they really turned we inside out. And we got a goal back on 16 minutes. Now, there's another story with this. Is my mate Frecky was in the TA at the time, and he was late getting into the match. So he came into the match on about quarter of an hour, celebrated the goal going in, and then couldn't believe it when everybody wasn't quite happy as they should have been. And everybody was saying, "Well, we're 3-1 down, mate." And he's like, "Oh, F off." He thought we were winding them up. It took him till half time to realise that we weren't winding them up. We were 3-1 down. There was no scoreboard for him to look at. There was no to do. But even though we got that goal back, we were never really in the game. And then we went 4-1 down with this free kick that went in directly from somewhere between the corner of the 18-yard box and the touchline, if I remember right. It just evaded everybody. And for some reason, after the match, Allardyce seemed to blame Rosenthal for that goal and pin the defeat on Rosenthal. Well, Rosenthal hadn't even started the game. He'd brought him on as a sub. He was hiding behind his players. He refused to say that he'd made a bad choice, and just it stood out. Everybody, it was the first time you seen him blink in charge of Newcastle United that the result and the performance were terrible, and he wouldn't have it, and he wouldn't take admittance for it, and it was an absolutely awful day. After 11 minutes, we were 3-0 down. I think I'll give them the first goal. I think it was somebody by the name of Paramore or something. No, Paramore? Yeah. African fullback, or French fullback. Yeah. And if I remember right, it was an absolute screamer, mind, which I suppose you've got to give them that. But then the other two goals, I think it was Ben Johnny and was a Johnny Attacker, who I think it was he on loan from Inter or something like that. And they just turned Kasapa inside out, and that was when we realised Kasapa were really, really, really bad, you know. And to be fair, I don't think Allardyce ever came back from that because the fan base had worked them out.
Yeah, I would agree. A horrendous game to be at as well. Steve Hasty, your first recollection?
Right, well, it's not a recollection of my own, but it's a recollection of a relative. I had my mum's cousin, John Maguire from Wallsend. John was a powder hole sprinter who, right up until his retirement, was still visiting the powder hole as a timekeeper. And he was one of these guys who could tell some great stories. And the story he told me was about a trip in February 1956 that he made down to Portsmouth to watch Newcastle. And I was like, I remember sitting there going, "You cannot have gone all the way to Portsmouth." And he goes, "Oh no, we did." He says, "We got time off work." He says, "I worked in the morning, got the afternoon off." He says, "And we got a coach down to Portsmouth." Now, God, what time would you have to leave work to get to Portsmouth for what was a 7 o'clock kickoff midweek? But he did it, and he said it was one of those trips where he says that they then travelled back overnight, and then he went straight. They dropped him off at work, and he went straight to work. He worked in the stores at the RBI, like the NHS stores. But the thing that struck me, as well as the fact the journey was to be amazing, to travel, you know, and I hadn't appreciated that people travel in those days. Now I found out about 10 minutes ago, well, just before the start of the show, that George was actually at this game. But the reason I'm talking about the game, it was not the special. It was a 2-0 win. Bill Curry and Vic Keeble scored. It was 15,000 there. But it was the first ever game officially within the Football League to be played under floodlights. And I thought floodlights had been around for years and years. But it turned out that all the way through from the 1930s onwards, and even before that, the football authorities were not keen on playing games under floodlights. And those grounds that did have lights, for example, earlier in the time, yeah, the FA had said you could play FA Cup games under lights, but you had to have an agreement between both clubs before you could actually switch the lights on. I don't know how that worked. I don't know whether there were not many night games or what, you know. But I just found this amazing. So anyway, Newcastle United played the first ever Football League game under floodlights at Fratton Park in 1956. Now, the other little piece to the story is that the whole plan of allowing teams was put forward by Sunderland the year before. They put the proposal forward to the Football League and said, we think that you should have games played under floodlights. But what the Football League decided was, with the FA, you could only have it in cup games, and only if it was, the other one was if a game had been postponed, you could then play a game under floodlights, again, if both clubs agreed. But it was only if the game had been postponed previously and it was to concertina things in. So there's a lot. It just shows you, you talk about the governance of the game, and we talk about the people who make decisions and stuff like that. Even back in the 50s, we had people in blazers sitting in the Football League making decisions that were arbitrary, that had absolutely no common sense built around them, But that was the game. And ironically, of all things, the game nearly didn't start. So John nearly travelled all the way down to watch Newcastle play, and the game was very, very nearly called off by, of all things, a power cut. It wasn't until the start he got there and managed to fix the floodlights that they actually got the game playing as well. So that's my recollection. I wasn't there before anyone asked. It was 1956. It was before I was born, but it's a story that's lingered within the family from my mum's cousin John, who's sadly not with us now. But I just thought, a little bit of history, a little bit of Newcastle United, and a little bit of the idiosyncratic ways of the Football League and the Blazers and how they run football then and still run it badly today.
Great stuff. Shout out to our sponsors, Spider VPN, for all your internet security. They've been with us for the last few months now. Just Google Spider VPN and they can help you with your internet security, protect your passwords and that kind of thing. Also, a big shout out to the home of Sir Bobby, of course, who's up in the corner today, skipsandbins.com, skipsandbins.com. Telephone number 0800 25 45 25 3. Email inquiries at skipsandbins.com. Website www.skipsandbins.com. Easy contract, free and pay as you go waste collection. And also a big shout out to John at qtechshop.co.uk, makers of pool tables and snooker tables in Wallsend in Newcastle, and the makers of our memorabilia and t-shirts, etc. You can get a t-shirt, that's the most popular one, at our website, NUFCmatters.com. Pop onto there if you want to get a t-shirt, a hoodie, a cup, whatever. And last but by no means least, a big shout out to John at Jab Signature, who makes all of our flyers, and he makes all the flyers for the show as well, and obviously came up with this little beauty to announce that the Three Amigos is no more, but it's now the Fab Four. Keith Patterson joining us full time, and the Fab Four is the name of the new show on a Friday. And this weekend we are joined on Friday night at 5:30 by Ben Jacobs, which is what a lot of people have asked. They'd like to see Ben and Keith on the same show. Well, both have agreed to do it, so that should make for a very interesting Friday night with all your usual regular slots on there as well. And don't forget, if you're a first-time visitor to the channel, then simply subscribe by clicking the Newcastle Legends badge down in the bottom right-hand corner. And that's it. You hit the subscribe button. You can subscribe for free. You'll get notifications as well if you set reminders for each show. And hit the thumb up to like the video tonight, please. And click share to share it to your other social media. And hit the comments box to chat to like-minded Newcastle fans in the chat. And always plenty of nice folk down there having a chat. Okay, George, we're back to you now, mate, for your second recollection.
Thank you. In the match Steve just talked about, how was our way there? Well, I was on the verge of signing up to become an apprentice within the university, and the university very kindly let me stay at school until we finished our county cup run, which we eventually won. So it was actually in '57 before I actually signed for the university. But when I was doing some of the interviews, they mentioned they were starting a project at Portsmouth with some Leander class frigates, and they needed to set up a lot of gear. They needed hands, people carrying batteries and things like that, because in those days they weren't. Yeah, the batteries for all the electronic gear weren't little things. They were big car batteries. You know, they were 12-volt car batteries, lead acid batteries. So they needed lots of hands just to carry things, and so I got the opportunity to go down and do that. And one of the bonuses was to just happen to be this floodlight match, which everybody went to as well. So it was an interesting coincidence when Steve mentioned it. So there we go. My second recollection, of course, our Neil's just killed it stone dead because he's chosen the one that I was going to talk about as well. But not entirely, because Portsmouth in our family at the time, in the not that time, but in the early 50s, 60s, when we talked about football at home, one of the clubs that regularly popped up was Portsmouth, of course. And names like Jimmy Dickinson and the two Froggatt brothers and people like that were well known in our household as some of the Newcastle players, because they were internationals that had a great name, and they played for England together and all the rest of it. And so Portsmouth was always a name that was fairly high on the discussions at home when I was very, very young. Now, the reason I chose the game in 4-1 defeat was that we'd enjoyed some super football ourselves, but then suddenly to find another team come and do to us what we'd been doing to other people was more than painful. It was absolutely excruciating. And a nearly 52,000 crowd there to watch it. And they didn't just beat us, they tore us to shreds. How it only stayed 4-1, I don't know. and bearing in mind that the one was an own goal from Sol Campbell anyway. But they absolutely tore us to shreds, and certainly the style of the defeat left an impression on me. Allardyce, the bit that Neil said about Allardyce, well, Allardyce was always a fake to me. I really didn't see anything in him at all when he came, and some of the stuff he talked about sports science and so on. It wasn't long before you realised he was talking through the back of an envelope. It was rubbish. And for once, I did see some of the positives in Redknapp, because this team played football of a very high quality. And while they scored 4, everyone from the fullbacks, Johnson and Palmer, the African player, and Diop and Cranshaw and Utaki and Bimanji, they all were firing shots from all angles. And Steve Harper had to be metal to stay with from getting a really tough thrashing, really hard thrashing. But then when I look down our team as well, the Brazilian centre-half Capacho, what a waste of space he turned out to be. But there were people who should have played better in that team. I mean, from Harper to Capacho, Enrique, Amdi Faye, Stephen Taylor, Barton, and Zogia, Milner, Butt, Owen, and Smith. Well, that's not an 11 that you would say was a slouch team, but they were made to look a slouch team by that particular Portsmouth team. So Neil chose that game, hasn't really upset me in that sense. Just that I enjoy the fact that a team came and took us apart with real football, is how I would describe it. And you know, later in the game when you seen Mendes and Carnu come on and tear us apart, Rosenthal came on, and the other subs were Emery and Martins. I don't care who we'd put on that day. Portsmouth were just up for it and playing really high quality stuff. So yes, it was a game to remember, but it was a defeat that you remember because it was a very sore one to take.
Yeah, very sore indeed. Steve Wilkinson, your next game?
Yeah, well, I'm going back to 1983, which was the promotion season, and a fantastic performance down at Portsmouth. I wasn't there at the game myself, and I've actually never been to Fratton Park. I've been to Portsmouth only once with work, but you kind of forget that in those days you didn't see the match. You know, we take for granted we've seen every game on the telly this season, and in those days it was about reading about it in the Football Pink or and then the Sunday Sun, and then you'd get to watch it on a Sunday afternoon on a shoot, or sometimes we won the big match, which was the sort of national ITV thing. But before we managed to see that game on the Sunday afternoon, and you can see it on YouTube now, it's a game of probably we would be arguably the entertainers at that time, and I'm sure had Keegan not jacked in at the end of that season when we went up, that the having the likes of Beardsley and Waddle and him and the team, plus all the rest of them that were coming through at that time, we would have been the entertainers then in the first division as it was then. But this game was memorable for 2 goals from Beardsley, 2 goals from Keegan, and also a significant performance by Chrissy Waddle, who contributed to making a couple of the goals. But the memorable goal, I mean, we actually took the lead in the first couple of minutes with a goal started by a Waddle run down the left wing. He put the ball through and right across the goal, and Keegan knocked it in on the far post. But the second goal, right on half time, was the memorable goal of the game. I suppose you could arguably call it the Beardsley shuffle. Keegan went down the left, he chipped it into the box, Beardsley picked it up, flicked it past the keeper, and then almost went to the goal line. And it was probably about 6 yards out on the goal line, and there was 2 defenders inside him, and he did some fantastic close control without the ball crossing the line. And then they'd all beaten the 2 defenders on the goal line, before getting just inside the post. And he tapped it in from about a yard. But the close control, which we've seen Beardsley do thousands of times, is the memorable thing. And anybody saw that goal will remember from that game. So we're 2-0 up. Portsmouth pulled one back, and then we had another slick move 5 minutes later, about 65 minutes or so. Beardsley flicked it on the halfway line. Keegan burst through with great pace into the box shrugged off the defender, and Beardsley with his pace, having flicked the ball on, caught up with Keegan, got inside the box, and he had Keegan laid into his path and he slotted it in. And then another 5 or 6 minutes later, there's another surgeon run from Waddle, sort of very similar to the sort of thing we saw from Willock on Saturday. A straight line run just inside the penalty area. Had a shot himself initially that the keeper parried, and then it broke to the edge of the penalty area, and Waddle sort of swung round, put a cross into the far post, and Keegan came in, volleyed it in. So we won that game 4-1, and it's a one that certainly when you look at, I think there's quite extensive highlights of that game on YouTube, and it's worth looking at them just to see how fantastically well we played that day. And obviously as that season ended, we got up into the first division, but sadly Keegan left, and everything. We had a few years up at that time, but never the same team I think as played that day. Arthur Cox was manager at the time. We had Kevin Carr in goal, John Anderson, Kenny Wharton at fullback, David McCreary, Keegan, Beardsley, Chris Worrell, Terry McDermott, John Ryan in the midfield, and then the centre halves, Glenn Moore, obviously, who we've talked about with a special show the other week in memory of him. Jeff Clark in the fullback, in the centre back positions. So a strong team, and a great performance from the lads that day. That's my second game.
Yeah, good stuff, Mitch.
Aye, sorry about before. My phone overheated again.
God, there it is. There's always a reference to the temperature.
Bloody nightmare. You know what it is? It's quarter to 10 at night, 37 bloody degrees outside, not a whiff of breeze. It's just ridiculous. Anyway, second game. I tell you what, I remember this for two reasons. One, a spectacular own goal, which I'll come to later. And this game was all about Mickey Quinn. And I don't think on this show we've talked about him enough, perhaps, about actually how good a striker he was. I know he gets slated for being overweight and unfit, but by God, he was a good striker. He knew where the back of the net was. And in this game, it showed in the first goal, he's one of those strikers know where to be in the box. And that means sometimes they know when to move, but it means sometimes they know when just to stand still and let everybody else move around them. And I tell you, the other striker who had an ability like that was Kevin Phillips at the Mackhams. He was another one sometimes scored his best goals when actually he didn't move at all. He just knew not to move. He knew to just wait and let the defenders move around him. And so the first goal on this was actually because the commentator made a pithy comment. If you go back and watch the highlights, you find it on YouTube, easy. About Mick Quinn comes out the box and makes a run into the corner to collect the ball, and the commentator, who I think might be Clive Tilsley, if I remember right, makes a pithy comment about Quinn popping up in an unusual place for him, But if you look, he was the centre of the move, and he played into the box. But then, instead of going on into the 6-yard box, he sort of hangs around on the corner of the 18-yard box, and suddenly the ball comes to him. He's in total open space. First touch is to turn it around. The second touch is with his left foot, and it's in the bottom left-hand corner of the goal. And it's a cracking finish. And that's the other thing about Mick Quinn we forget. We forget he could hit them with both feet. He didn't care. As long as he had a cracking goal, he would put his leather through it. It didn't matter whether it was right foot or his left foot. And when I say gifted, the only player I forgive for being exceptionally one-footed is Lionel Messi, because that foot is exceptionally talented. But if I can be two-footed, anybody can be, and I am, and so it frustrates me. And certainly Mick Quinn was. His second goal was a typical Mick Quinn goal, where a number 9 should be running in from penalty spot at the edge of the 6-yard box, and not quite a tap in, but directed around the keeper 2-0. game was dead and buried. But then Pompey were given a fantastic glimmer of hope by John Anderson, who scored the most amazing bullet header into the back of the own net, trying to cut a cross out. And again, if you look at it, it was actually when I've seen it back, it was actually a better header than I realised. It was just an absolute pile driver into the top corner that the keeper can do nothing about. But no harm done. We won the game. I think it was much needed as well, because I think we'd sort of been in and amongst the promotion race and then dropped off. We'd had a little poor run of form, and that got back on track again. Now, unfortunately, we know how that season ended as well. But yeah, that was the second game, and it was all about Mick Quinn.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I would have taken the wind out of Butcher's sails there, because I was going to talk about a game where Mick Quinn scored twice for us against Portsmouth. So we will continue to talk about Mick Quinn. It's 5 months after the game I just said, when we nearly got relegated to the third division. Quinn had been injured. Now, from just in that 5 months, Keegan had produced his first managerial magic trick, I suppose, by keeping us up. But even then, we all bought into what he was trying to do. He got us, we got him, and he was like a messiah type figure. And we trusted him when he let players go that were fans' favourites. He brought in ex-Macklins, Venison, Bracewell, and there was no grumbling about it. We had Rob Lee brought in, Beresford from Portsmouth, who was signed, and it was like, well, it was a different team, but the atmosphere was different, and the nervousness, trepidation, tension had been replaced by, I suppose, joy, belief, hope, and this is all down to one man. And this is the season. It's probably one of my favourite seasons, actually, the promotion season, the 92-93. Because it was the start of such a magical ride, and it was infancy of the entertainers. If we're using 3 words I had for entertainers, it was exhilarating, swashbuckling, and mesmeric. But this was at its very start. Mick Quinn had been injured, and he come back into the team. And he was a fan's favourite. He'd scored a bucket load of goals a couple of years before that, and the first goal, remember, he's playing against his former team, and it's always the same. It normally happens to us, doesn't it? The ex-player scores against us. But this time, young Nash, Clarkey, put a ball in with his left foot crossed in with his left from the left side, and it was screaming just to be headed. It was such a perfect cross. If you're a centre forward, I don't know if anyone can remember it, but if not, try and look it up, because I'll always remember, because Clarkey's a year older than me. And I used to watch them, remember the odd dealers, and they had all the youngins playing. So I was more invested in some of the lads I used to play at Newcastle Boys with. So I was more invested in watching the younger Newcastle players than like the new stars that were coming at the time, because we weren't used to starting really we. So this ball from Clark, and I'm left-footed. I can't keep with me right as well, Mitch, but I am predominantly left-footed.
I see.
And it was a quality cross, seriously, and at the time, there wouldn't have been many better headers of the ball than Mick Quinn waiting on the end of it, and he just put it away. Then Ned Kelly, his partner in crime for the start of that season, was he scored just a typical Ned Kelly goal. He got put through, evaded one defender, and he made it look easy, where he just nonchalantly chips it, but with a bit of power into the corner, just out the keeper's reach. He scored a load of goals like that for us. Another underestimated player in our history. Then, talk after just bigging up Dave Kelly, he missed the second half. He missed a sitter, an absolute sitter, and to this day I still don't know how he missed it. Mick Quinn then had one ruled offside, which I'm sure VAR nowadays would have reprieved him, because I really can't say how he's offside until Mitch mentioned the fact that he doesn't move and everyone runs round him. So it is possible he was standing in offside position, and then all the players started getting back to marking. But he put a cracking header away again, but it was disallowed. But not to be outdone, he got a cross in there for his second goal, for his brace. That goal looked more offside than the one that got disallowed, but he smashed the roof of the net from about 6 yards. Pompey got their goal, consolation goal, make it 3-1. Probably the last 3-1 we had, actually, thinking about it. But that was the start of our mesmeric rise, I suppose, when we went on that. It was an 11-game unbeaten run at the start of that season, or in fact, winning run, not unbeaten run. And, you know, the rest is hopefully our better days. We have better days to come. But I just loved that season, from where we were the season before to where we finished 12 months later. It's, you know, it'll live with all of us who were lucky enough to experience it.
Yeah, great stuff. Great stuff. Steve Hasty, your final recollection?
Final recollection, I'm going to go back to 2005-2006 season. Before we talk about the game, I'll just set the scene. That season, first 6 games of the season, we were adrift in 19th place after the first 6. We only had 2 points. Things did start to pick up as we got close to Christmas week. And at that point, we seemed to click. It was the day before my birthday, 17th of December, and we went down to West Ham. Michael Owen scored a hat-trick. Shearer scored, beat them 4-2, and everybody thought, this is it. I think it was only the 3rd time that Shearer and Owen had scored in the same game. But it looked as though things were starting to move on. We then lost away at Liverpool. We lost away at Spurs, which everybody remembers. That was when Owen did his metatarsal in after colliding with Robinson in goal. We drew with Borough. We lost to Fulham. We lost Blackburn. We lost Man City. We had a poor game in the cup, but Shearer did score. I think it was Mansfield. But we got to the beginning of February, and after all those runs, we're sitting there in 15th position. And as I say, we'd lost Borough, Fulham, Blackburn, Man City, and drew with Borough, lost the others. At which point, the chairman decided enough was enough. You can't have a manager that's allowing a team to be languishing in 15th place and losing 5 out of 6 games. So he sacked Stus. So Stus was gone. Today, you can go 22 games without a win, or 20 out of 22, and you'll still survive. But he made the jump. He made it, and that was him gone. And as I say, Shearer had only scored once since the game when Owen scored his hat-trick. So we goes into this game, and Shearer's been sitting, and he's on 200 goals. And we all know what happened. And Zogbia scores after 41 minutes, 1-0. And then we get to the 64th minute, and we've been willing, because of the run that we've been on, everyone was willing Shearer to score. And there was a totally different atmosphere in the ground to what we'd had previous, probably simply because Stus had gone. Stus was sacked. Finally, we got rid of that mess of a manager and what had happened previously in the cup and everything else. And we had Glenn Roeder in the dugout. And 64th minute comes, and I think the whole of Tyneside was willing Shearer to break that record. And you just think, beautiful clearance, cleared by the keeper, given. Ball drops to Shearer. He flicks it back, and he turns. It lands at Amiobi's feet. And Amiobi, as he could do, we mentioned him before. Steve, you talked about him there. And as he could do, he could do things that you didn't expect, and he just passes this lovely little back heel straight into the path of Shearer, who's running alongside a player that we eventually signed in O'Brien. And he taps the ball, and he squeezes it through the keeper's legs in the back of the net. Now, I don't know about you lads. I know you were probably all at the game, but I think from the 64th minute to the end, I think it was probably the most emotional I've been in a game. The noise was amazing. The chanting that went on from that moment onwards, the sheer exuberance and excitement and joy that Shearer was showing after scoring that goal was just reflected right the way around the ground. It was the most amazing atmosphere. And the hairs were on the back of your neck, weren't they? You know, your arms, the pins and needles. It was just amazing. It was just absolutely fantastic. And you know that for me, we ended up winning 2-0, but it was Shearer. We already knew it was going to be Shearer's last season, but he finally got the record. And I remember rightly, I think it was Jackie Milburn's widow who turned around and said, you know what, Jackie was delighted. He would have been delighted that Alan broke his record. And then she tagged on the end, because Jackie had scored in 3 cup finals or won 3 cup finals for Newcastle. So he still held that record that was never going to be, let's face it, Alan was never going to get. His career was over. But obviously he carried on and he managed to get 5 more goals before the end of the season. But that for me, that game, the emotion, the last hour or the last half hour, and the noise, and that was what I'd love to see back at St James's Park again. That atmosphere. If you could recreate it and bottle it and just open it every Saturday, would be absolutely fantastic.
Yep, Ferry Hill Mag says Stu and Mitch look like they've been on a weekender. Well, they have.
With matching T-shirts.
Aye.
Matching T-shirts, yeah. They didn't miss the opportunity.
Courtesy of John at Q-Tech. Thanks, mate.
Goodfellas T-shirts. I love it. Great stuff, lads. Okay, as always, some great recollections. We'll finish the show off by doing the... let's go with the celebrity fans first. Not many, it has to be said, and certainly not many that's going to trip the lads up. I think we'll go with this guy because he is a celebrity. You get a point for guessing his name.
Oh, aye.
John Portsmouth FC Westwood.
What a fantastic name. Bumped into him in the Black Bull once. He came into the Black Bull when we used to do talkings there, Steve Hasty. Do you remember?
Right, we did, you did. What a character. Was he a lawyer or something, or a solicitor or something daft like that?
He said, I think, and I could be wrong, he sells antique books.
Oh, right.
He keeps him in his hair, I think. Unbelievable set of locks that I'm clearly jealous. Okay, the guy on the left here.
Ian Dark.
Yeah, Ian Dark, of course. You didn't know that, Portsmouth fan.
No.
He was one of the main shareholders of the Pompey Trust when they resurrected the club.
There you go. Good knowledge.
Got George on mute. We'll need him if there's some older ones there. Then we need George. Oh, no, him was Fred Dinich.
Fred Dinich, man.
How did you know that?
How did I know that? I used to watch him when I was younger.
Fred Dinich, of course. I've spoken to him on a few occasions about the Cray twins. Also did the Cray's biography, Fred Dinich. Did their very first book. Used to visit.
Did a lot of crime films, didn't he, Steve? A lot of crime.
He did.
Films. Yeah.
Tommy Boyd.
Magpie.
Tommy Boyd. Yeah. Bobby Dazzler of a jump at that. It must have been Christmas.
Will Ferrell.
Will Ferrell, but wasn't he on the Arsenal one as well?
Now, did you like me link there? I said that was a nice Christmas jumper that Tommy Boyd had, then went into Will Ferrell dresses. That was
fantastic.
Yeah, professional, I thought, yeah. The guy in the middle. The giveaways on the book.
Yes, guy. Wait, it's on the book, man.
Is it Ant Middleton by any chance?
I said, yeah, the clue. I said, the clue's on the book.
Is it Andre?
It is Andre, yeah, it looks like Andre.
Oh.
Not Freddie Starr, is it?
It's not Freddie Starr. No sign of a hamster there.
No.
Oh, dear me.
No, I'm stuck on that one.
Any clues on his shirt? No.
He's a musician.
Yeah.
No.
Got me, Steve, I'm afraid.
Anybody? I'm always likely to find Mitch get these ones. I always had a feeling you would get this, Mitch. You know.
Do we get a band? Which band's he in? Then?
I should, but when you say the name, I'm going to kick myself.
Yeah. The problem I've got is that the link that I've actually sent myself now isn't working with the guy on. So I'm going to have to come back to it. Genuinely, I will get it though. Hold on, I will get it. We'll come to that. We'll have to come back to that. It's the first time that's happened. This guy,
Arnie
Schwarzenegger.
Yeah, Arnold Schwarzenegger. Has that link come up? No, it hasn't. Unfortunately, lads, I might have to bring that one back next week.
He lived in Portsmouth. Did you know that?
Yeah, he lived in Portsmouth. He trained in Portsmouth. Okay. And this one, I'm sure she's been up for numerous clubs as well, to be perfectly honest.
Amanda Holden.
I'm sure this is It's another tenuous link with the players, isn't it? Right, I've got the name of that singer now, guys. It was Brian Howe from Bad Company.
Oh, right.
So there you go. Brian Howe from Bad Company stumped the lads this week and stumped me because the link wasn't working where I'd originally got the picture from. So there we go. Okay, players that played for both teams. I cannot see you not getting any of these.
Pav.
Pavel Sternicek.
Is it Kevin Dillon?
It's not.
No.
This isn't tricky. Now, I thought this might trick you, but I wasn't 100% sure. He didn't have the longest career at Newcastle. That's why.
Did he play at all for Newcastle?
Now, I don't know. I didn't do my research that well.
It looked a bit like Andy Sinton, but I'm not sure.
No, it's not Andy Sinton.
My gosh.
No, got you with that one then. From Pav to Gav, it's Gavin Maguire.
My goodness.
Oh. Centre back, wasn't he?
Yeah, did
he
sign for
centre
Newcastle.
back?
I'm pretty sure he played a couple of games. Maybe he's even played 6 or 7, I think, if I remember rightly.
Is that Gary Brady?
Gary Brady.
Correct. Gary Brady.
Right.
That's Beresford.
John Beresford. Couldn't find a picture of this guy in a Pompey strip.
Steve Agnew.
That's Steve Agnew.
Steve Agnew, of course, currently on the coaching staff at Newcastle with some horrendous sideboards there. Like, it's got to be said.
It's got more hair now.
Shaka.
Shaka doing, looks like he's getting ready to do a bit of fencing there, doesn't he?
Mickey Quinn.
Mickey Quinn.
There we go. We don't mention enough of Mick Quinn, and then he gets mentioned 3 times on the show.
That's Kevin Dillon.
That's Kevin Dillon. Correct.
He had shorter hair for us.
That's Mark Stimson.
Mark Stimson.
Mark Stimson.
Correct. Guy on the left.
Jim Smith.
Jim Smith.
Old Eagle. And last but by no means least,
Luar.
Lamana Lualua.
Lamana Luar. Well done, lads. So, I'm quite pleased with myself there. I managed to trick you on a couple of them. So, happy days. Okay, 11 players and a manager, please. Steve Hasty, we'll come to you first.
Right, I put Shaka in goal. I went for Griffin and Beresford at fullback, with Williamson and O'Brien in the centre. I went Gary Brady, Dillon, Benny Christensen and Lauren Robert. And I had Mickey Quinn and Luar up front with Jim Smith as manager.
Fantastic. Okay, Stu.
I had Jim Smith as manager. Pav in goal, obviously. Griffin and Bez fullback, same as Steve. I had Andy O'Brien and Sol Campbell at centre halves. Kevin Dillon and Matt Ritchie in midfield with the wide men of Luar and Lauren Robert. And up front was Mickey Quinn, who we don't mention enough, and Mr. Andrew Cole, who I do mention quite well.
Good stuff. Okay, Mitch, over to you.
Being inspired by Sam Allardyce's back 5, that's what I've gone for this week. Jim Smith is the manager, Pav in goal. 3 centre-backs of Andy O'Brien, Benny Christensen and Sylvain Distan. Wing-backs is Griffin and Beresford. Midfield of Dillon, Lauren Robert and Matt Ritchie. And Andy Cole and Mick Quinn up front.
Okay, Steve Wilkinson.
Yeah, mine was exactly the same as Stu's, apart from the back. I had Sylvain Distan. So it's Pav in goal, Andy Griffin and Beresford, Andy O'Brien, Sylvain Distan, Kevin Dillon and Matt Ritchie in the middle, Lamana Luar and Lauren Robert, and then Andy Cole and Mick Quinn up front, and Jim Smith manager as well.
Good stuff. And last but by no means least, George, over to you, mate.
Well, you'll see a slightly different age slant on me to what the rest of the lads have done.
You've got Jimmy Schooler in.
Yes. Pav in goal, I think that was a given out of sentimental reasons, if nothing else. And in fact, he was the best goalkeeper as well. Beresford, Griffin, then Jimmy Schooler, Sol Campbell, Tommy Casey, another blast from the past, Northern Ireland left-sided midfielder who tackled like a house end, a brick end. You could never get through Tommy Casey, and a shot like a cannon. And then in midfield, Richie, Lauren Robert, Wayne Routledge, Jimmy Schooler is in there, of course, as well. So, Mick Twin at number 9. Mick Twin at number 9. And Jimmy Smith, manager.
Great stuff, lads. As always, fantastic show. And that was another difficult team. And as if things couldn't get any worse, Tom Dixon got in first. Our friend Tom Dixon, who supported the show for 12 months.
Clearly, send the boys round for you, Tom, I tell you.
Clearly likes to make things difficult. Wigan Athletic next week. Now, I've got some great stories about bus trips to Wigan Athletic, but nothing about the game. Because I never remember the game.
Well, some of mine will be
the Robin or something, the Red Robin, the pub next to Wigan.
Some of mine will be old ones when Wigan weren't in the bloody league.
Yeah, many would say they wish they'd never been in the league, I think. But
I'm on holiday next week, lads.
so Wigan Athletic.
I'm
getting a note from you,
We're on lockdown for 2 weeks today. We're on lockdown. I'll have plenty of time.
All right, well, it's Wigan Athletic next week, guys, next Wednesday. So great to have you on. I'm back tomorrow night, 6 o'clock till 7 with Super Mac and Gibbo. Thanks very much, lads, and I'll see you next week. And I'll see you two guys for the not the three amigos, the Fab Four. Take care. Good night.
Cheers, everyone.
Cheers, everyone.
Critics attack. It feels like I've been talking to myself again. But it's the only way you're ever gonna learn. You look back and it's all in the past.